Alrighty, today we're going to be taking a look at KAMIL Jablonski versus Artem Morozov. I think that this match does a great job of showcasing the power of a flop press. I think that a lot of times people think of the flop presser as someone with just a super strong arm, and if only they could get the match into a hook, if only they could bend their wrist, they would just destroy their opponent. But they're so strong. The flop presser is so strong that even without their wrist, they can still beat their opponent. But I don't think this is the case at all. I think a lot of times flop pressers do not want the match to go inside, and they're actually trying very hard to dump their wrist underneath their opponent. They're trying to get the match into that flop press lane and prevent the match from going inside. They don't want their wrist to be bent. They want it to be flopped back. And I think this match does a great job of showcasing that a flop press really is its own move. It's not just a technique where you're okay with your wrist going, but you actually need your wrist to go. You need to get underneath your opponent in order to overpronate them, in order to put them on their brachialis, on their bicep. And it's going to be in this super awkward position for them. They're not going to have any side pressure, no shoulder commitment. And I think we're going to see this in this match. But first of all, right off the bat, we can see how much power Artem Morozov has. And this is when this doesn't work. You can see that KAMIL does go ahead and he bends his wrist. He does try to get the match inside. You can see him pushing past Artem Morozov. The match goes into a hook. And that looks like a pretty good position for KAMIL. He's pretty much on Artem Morozov's bicep, but there's also quite a bit of side pressure from Artem. And you can see just a slight drag back as soon as the go happens. And this is indicating that KAMIL is not just having to apply down pressures, but he's trying to apply side pressure to prevent the match from being drug out. And if you're trying to press while someone is dragging you out, that feels really awkward. And this is what happens in this match. And you can just see that right off the go, KAMIL is just nowhere near strong enough to fight Artem Morozov inside. Artem's bicep and his inner elbow is just super strong. His internal shoulder rotation is insane, or his side pressure is insane. His cup. And he takes a lower grip here, seemingly on purpose, or at least he allows the match to go into that really deep grip. And now KAMIL doesn't have any way to get underneath or to get out the back in this match. He controls KAMIL's pronator. So great win from Artem Morozov here. And sometimes this happens too. If you're a presser, sometimes you just kind of have to get really geared up mentally because it's more about bone structure, and pressing sometimes is more so just about trying harder rather than it is achieving some sort of muscular failure. So sometimes it's really mental, and you really can increase your press strength significantly just from the idea of trying harder, really gearing yourself up. And I think we've seen that too with Jerry sometimes, where it takes him a round to kind of get into the match. But now going into round two, we're going to see this time KAMIL is setting up to try to get underneath. A little bit more of a shallow grip. There's maybe a little bit more distance in between the arms here. And you can see he's not going to push forward now, but he's going to push more in this direction, more out the back underneath Artem Morozov's arm. And this is going to be KAMIL's lane for success. He's going to have to get underneath once again. And there's a bunch of false starts here. We're going to get to an actual round in a second. But you can see here, when he gets that, this is a lot less comfortable for Artem Morozov. Still outside of straps. Artem fouls, and eventually we're going to go to straps here and actually see a little bit more action. And I think that this one is actually a clean slip. And now we're going to go to straps. And now watch what happens in straps. Now, Artem may, if I remember correctly, he might make an adjustment here and just press KAMIL. But this also may be the round where it goes underneath. Yeah, so right now, you can tell Artem's had enough goes where he's experienced that pressure on his bicep where KAMIL was going underneath him. And notice how KAMIL tries to go underneath. He tries to bend his wrist back. And he tries to kind of go underneath. You can see his wrist is cracked back. It's such a weird looking position. But if you look at the linearity of his forearm and then his wrist, you can see that he's literally cracked his own wrist back trying to go underneath. But Artem has this super deep grip, and Artem supinates, and he cups, and he prevents KAMIL from accessing that flop press, from going underneath. And now KAMIL is basically just in the hook again, and then Artem brings his own shoulder forward and presses him. Great thing to do against a flop presser. If you can supinate against a flop presser, you can take a little bit lower, deeper grip and prevent them from getting underneath. Then they're going to have just no access to their power. They're never going to be able to isolate your bicep. and they won't be able to overpronate you. So again, fantastic win from Artem Morozov here. Textbook thing to do against a flop presser. That's perfect. And there's just nothing Kamil can do there. Now, I think that ends up being called a foul, and we're going to get a restart. There's a ton of fouls and restarts in this match. It's a little bit confusing, so I apologize if the commentary is not quite lined up, but I'm more concerned about the technique, regardless of if the match comes back or not. Now, on this one, Artem tries basically the same thing, but what we're going to see is that Kamil does end up getting underneath here, and notice how as soon as that supination goes away, as soon as Artem's supination goes away, and as soon as his radial deviation or his wrist rise height drops, as soon as that high knuckle drops, then he's in trouble. Trying to low hand top roll a flop presser is probably about the worst thing you could do. But this isn't a technical decision from Artem Morozov. He's well aware of this, but Kamil's able to force him here. Kamil is able to get kind of halfway there, and then he sort of rolls out. He gets even more of a position here, pushes down through that thumb, and he is able to dump the wrist rise of Artem Morozov, and now he's in his spot. And from here, you can see Artem is in trouble. It's crazy to see how easily he was defeating Kamil in the first two rounds, or in the first round and then the restart, when he was inside. And now that he's outside, it's just so hard. And I think that if this is the match, if this is the lane that the match took place in every single round, I think Kamil probably would have won. And he either fouls or gets a pin here. I'm not sure what happens. But I think, to me, from this position, Kamil was totally going to pin him. I don't think there's anything Artem could do. I think he was just going to slowly bleed out. And I think that this is called as an elbow foul off the back, or it's called as a pin. I'm not sure. Yeah, we got an elbow on Artem Morozov. But you can see that once he gets that overpronated position on Artem Morozov, once he intentionally flops his wrist underneath, and that is what's happening. He's trying to get his wrist to flop back. Artem's power declines significantly because he's in this overpronated position. He has no access to his shoulder commitment, no access to his supinated side pressure. And it's just really interesting to see that the flop press is not just a desperation move. It is very intentional, and it puts your opponent in an awkward position when you overpronate them by intentionally. And you can see it here. Kamil is intentionally that kind of meaty part of his wrist, the bottom of his palm, or just his wrist knuckle. He is shoving it underneath Artem Morozov's arm on purpose. And then that's what's going to make him overpronated. So pretty cool technique there. And going into round three, we may not even be in round three. Okay, so we're still in round two, and we're going to see this once again. Now this time Kamil does go ahead and he just commits super hard to that shoulder press. And even when Artem gets his wrist bent, Kamil just goes through him. Now I think this is going to come back on a early start. And so once again, now we're in the final go of round two. This match had so many fouls, so many restarts. And this time Kamil tries the same thing, but Artem anticipates it and he drags him out of that press lane. And this is going to be an easy day for Artem. Now he gets a momentary stop there, Kamil does, which is impressive in the hook, but it's not going to be quite enough. And actually there's going to be one more go because of the foul. So we are still in round two of this match. And once again, Kamil is able to access that underneath lane. Artem is taking that supinated kind of low grip, trying to force the hook. But Kamil is still able to get through. He's able to get underneath. And once that position happens right here, it's probably going to be all over for Artem Morozov. And he is able to get the pin there, but as you can see, massive elbow foul, way, way off the back. I don't know if he could have pinned him there, potentially, without doing that, but that is going to be a foul on Artem Morozov. They do call it as a win live, but then they go back and they see that it was a huge elbow foul. And finally, I think this is for real the last start of round three. This round started about 15 times. Kamil once again is able to get that underneath position, and Artem is going to foul off the back. And it's just crazy to see the power difference. When Kamil's wrist is flopped back, he's in a much better position than when his wrist is bent. But this is going to be the final foul on Artem Morozov. The scorecard down here is not correct, or the foul card is not correct. And this is finally going to be a win for Kamil Jablonski, 1-1 now. After this, I believe we're never going to see Artem allow him into that press position again, or allow him to get his wrist to flop back again. So this time, Artem taking that really low, and notice how there's no separation now between the arms. They're actually overlapping a little bit. In some of the previous rounds, you could see some separation between Artem's arm and Kamil's arm. Now that's gone, and that's because Artem is taking this super deep, super far past grip on purpose. And you can see, even still, Kamil is able to get through, but in straps, it's probably going to be a little bit different. You can see a similar setup now, where he's taking this low, really deep grip. Notice the distance between Artem's thumb and his fingers. There's a big gap there, and that is because Artem is intentionally going as far forward as he can to prevent Kamil from being able to flop press underneath. And in this case, Kamil feels that, and he ends up going forward, it looks like. But Artem is able to get the match into a hook, and as soon as it's in a hook, there's probably just nothing Kamil's really going to be able to do from there. So he rolls down, and he does get a momentary stop, Kamil does, which is pretty impressive. And let's see, this match is going to be called as a win for Artem Warzinski. No foul in that pull. Going into the next round here, we're going to see a similar thing where Kamil is unable to get into that flop press position. And you can see once again, notice how low Artem is gripping. You can see here's Kamil's thumb knuckle. Artem doesn't care about covering that. He's way lower than the thumb knuckle. He's not trying to get a high grip at all. He's trying to get a deep grip. He's trying to get past him to where there's no way that Kamil can flop press underneath. And Kamil can feel this at this point. There's not even a point in him trying to flop underneath because Artem is just so low on his hand. So just from the setup, just from a technical perspective, before there's even pressure applied, Artem is denying Kamil's access to flop his wrist back. And you can see he just goes right into Artem's bicep and right into Artem's external shoulder rotation, or internal rather, but it's just too much. If you saw this position, you would probably think that this is a pretty good position from Kamil, but Artem is just a little bit too much here. That's going to be a foul on Kamil or a warning, and we're just going to see the same thing over and over again. As soon as Artem takes this low grip and denies Kamil access to his flop, he's just not going to have anything. And here we see Artem start looking at Kamil. He starts holding him. You can see this is a much better angle of that low grip. So Artem could take his index knuckle as high as this thumb knuckle on Kamil if he wanted to. If he wanted to get a high grip, but he doesn't want that. He wants a low grip. So his knuckle, his index knuckle, is really more on Kamil's lower thumb knuckle. So that should show that's about 2 inches of a low grip that he's taking intentionally in order to deny Kamil's access to that flop and get the match inside. And Artem comes around, brings his shoulder forward. So once he gets to this position, the match is all over. Really, it is about, can Kamil get underneath and flop his wrist back, and can Artem stop that? And initially, Artem couldn't really stop it, but he figured out all that he has to do is take that low grip, and then it's going to be all over. This is something we've seen Denis Saplinkov do in the past. And in this round, it's probably the most obvious. You can see how far, look at the bottom of Kamil's hand, and it's already in alignment with the top of Artem's wrist. This is not at all a setup you would see from a top roller, for example, that was trying to get outside and trying to attack the fingertips. The entirety of Kamil's hand is past Artem's forearm. This is an insanely deep grip. There's so much overlap between both forearms, and you can see the gap too. As soon as the ref kind of moves his hand away, there's a big gap between Artem's hand and Kamil's wrist right there, where he can wrap around him super easily. And so this match is definitely going into a hook. And once he gets it there, once again, super, super easy, super dominant for Artem Morozov. He's on the runner. And this match was over. It ends up going back because Kamil didn't understand the rule set, so he stopped pulling there. But I think it was super over anyway. And we just do the same thing once again. Not quite as deep of a grip this time. You can see Kamil, there's more of an overlap between his hand and Artem's arm. But still, just going to go right into the hook. A little bit better for Kamil. But Artem's talking to him. Artem has the position in the hook that he needs. It's close enough. It's not perfect, but it's plenty. And he's going to rip right through Kamil here. So I think that this match was really cool. And I think it did a great job of showcasing that a flop presser is not just someone who's way stronger than his opponent and he can pull even without his wrist. He needs his wrist to be broke back in order to win. If he wants to win, if he wants to access his power and to deny his opponent's power, he's trying to get his wrist underneath his opponent's arm. And he's going to do that in order to make his opponent have an overpronated position like this, and to be on their bicep where they don't have anywhere near as much power. But in order for him to do that, he has to flop underneath. If the match goes inside, if he gets his wrist bent, then it's going to be all over for him. So hopefully this match showcased some of the kind of nuances of a flop press, and I hope that this was helpful for you guys. All right, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.